For this assignment, we had to create our own policy that would enforce penalties for certain types of cybercrime, and I chose to go with child pornography as my target, and so I came up with the Child Pornography Protection Act of 2017. Currently, the laws against cybercrime that I chose to focus on were 18 U.S. Code 2251, the sexual exploitation of children. This law states that any person who assists, coerces, entices, persuades, or employs a minor into the manufacturing, distribution, or transmission of child pornography be fined under this title and imprisoned not less than 35 years and nor more than life. Any organization that violates, attempts, or conspires to violate this section shall be fined under this title. Whoever, in the course of an offense under this section, engages in conduct that results in the death of a person shall be punished by death or imprisoned for not less than 30 years. There is also the Cybersecurity Act of 2015. It protects information of private individuals and businesses. This also means that businesses are liable for encrypting their networks in order to protect individuals who access their networks. These networks also need to be encrypted single sign-in, much like Baker's website, and be able to have network and identity management like profiles, username, resettable passwords, and the like. This is a protection against surveillance as well, though there is still some surveillance allowed in order to advance investigations for the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. There's a time requirement all businesses to implement these changes in the next 3 years. Any penalties used will be related to the crimes committed in the weekend networks, such as fraud. This is a brand new law and it's pretty powerful, and once it's instated, it's going to relieve a lot of problems but probably also create some. Then I also have the 15 U.S. Code 1644, fraudulent use of credit cards and penalties. This law summary states that if you knowingly use a credit card that's not yours in the purchase of goods, interstate commerce, foreign commerce, or cash advances, you shall face penalties such as fines not more than $10,000 or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. This law has had many additions since 1970, however, this is the basic understanding of the law as it's written. So basically, there's a lot of issues with internet-related laws, and that's because a lot of them were written in the 1970s and in the 1980s before internet was actually widely accessible to most people in their home. Over time, laws were put into action to help provide boundaries and consequences. However, with the rapid development of technology and the accessibility, laws cannot be written fast enough to accommodate the crimes. As a result, some older laws are still being used to make rulings on cases that could not be foreseen at the time they were written. Laws must continue to evolve on a regular basis in order to meet the booming internet industry and all the criminals that lurk anonymously. My apologies. The biggest target needs to be jurisdictional in that we can define where the criminal must be prosecuted and prosecuted accurately. A person located in Russia should be penalized in Russia, even if the fraud or other crime took place against American citizens. Then, once the criminal is given Russian penalties, they need to be sure there is a retribution for the victims in the U.S. So then we need to just strengthen our jurisdictions and work in conjunction with other countries. So we can bring justice. While it's going to be an uphill battle, I believe Congress is beginning to get a handle of legislation that protects people against cybercrime, but also gives reasonable punishment and repercussion if the criminal can be caught. That's the biggest caveat, is that these laws can be written but are only applicable within the U.S. and cannot impact anyone from other countries unless their country has similar laws, and even still, it is a matter of finding that person in order to bring them to justice. It is important they continue to write new laws as well as amend outdated laws to make sure that the laws match the type of crime being punished for, which means maximum penalties. We want there to be justice for the crimes committed, so it is difficult for reference laws written pre-internet as a proper reference for a crime in 2017. The accuracy is essential, and while these outdated laws may provide a basis we can reference, it is not necessarily going to be accurate or impactful on the criminal if there's nothing written in the law that says for various crimes committed on the internet era. If I were to enact my own policy, I would start first by targeting a central issue, which is child pornography, and I would be sure to strengthen the penalties for possession and distribution. Child pornography is not protected under the First Amendment because it's viewed as an illegal contraband under state and federal law and is considered child abuse. Currently in the state of Michigan, the penalty of possession of child porn is a felony punishable by 4 years, $10,000 in fines, asset forfeiture, and possible restitution. Penalty for the distribution of child pornography, is a felony punishable by up to 7 years in prison, $50,000 in fine, asset forfeiture, and possible restitution. Penalty for the production of child pornography is a felony punishable by 20 years in prison, $100,000 fine, asset forfeiture, and possible restitution. Please note that what I'm identifying here is that all the legislature says up to, and my policy would take away the up to clause of penalties and ensure that this is all the minimum that an offender would receive. There's no reason a person who willingly abuses and sexualizes a child should be allowed to roam free after only a few months in jail, which happens all too often. It was found that in 1997, federal child pornography offenders received approximately a 20-month sentence, which is a stark contrast in 2010 of offenders serving 118 months. Some states already ensure a minimum sentence requirement, but it's not federally recognized nor is adopted by all the states, and that this is what should change. It could be argued here that there is no sexual act actually occurring against a child, but then I counterback that someone had to make the pornography and thus a child was harmed in the making of that film or those images. This is not a victimless crime and should not be viewed as such. Children are being harmed and the likeness of children are being abused. Pedophiles may not be able to help the attraction they have towards children, but we can mediate the impact this has on children and change the way it is handled in the case it is brought forward. So what's going to be the impact? Well, obviously, point blank, child pornography is in the top 10 most common internet crimes that we have. Making harsher minimum punishments will help reduce the amount of people willing to engage in these activities. It reduces the access, but of course, as we see with anything that is harshly punished, such as prohibition, people will find a way around it. There's always going to be rings of distribution for child pornography in a seedy underworld that forces them to be sneakier with the distribution in order to avoid their detection. There's no way to completely absolve the world of this or any crime, but we can make it a harder hit for those who are caught. 4 years, 7 years, 20 years, they seem like a large number for some, but the victims of these crimes will live long after these sentences, and we need to stand by the victims and not sugarcoat the sentences for the perpetrators. In relation to the Patriot Act, it was enacted in 2001. The Patriot Act stands for Uniting and Strengthening America by Providing Appropriate Tools Required to Intercept and Obstruct Terrorism Act of 2001, and it was written in order to access to wiretapping, business searches, and surveillance of lone wolves potentially related to terrorist groups. This was brought forth in response to the terrorist attacks in 2001. This law has helped in some regards, giving green lights for the investigations so long as it's terrorism related or a risk to national security. There is more access that allows intelligence agencies to ability to investigate as long as it fits under their prescribed requirements. The Child Pornography Protection Act would not relate to the Patriot Act, does not relate to terrorism or homeland security. There may be a need for wiretapping or surveillance which could eventually associate with the Patriot Act, but directly it does not. Thank you.